अति उच्चतम जीवन बने परमार्थ में व्यवहार हो। ना हम लगे अपने लिए, हमको सभी से कर्ज है। गुरुदेव के आशीष के जो सोचने का फर्ज है। हम वो पुजारी तत्व के, गुरुदेव के आदेश के, सच प्रेम के नित्य नेम के, सर्वधर्म के सत्कर्म के, ओझिल आरती अन्याय की अभिमान की, सेवा करनी वो दास की, परवाह नहीं वो जान की। छोटे न हो हम बुद्धि से, वो विश्व में से ईश्वर में, वो राम में और कृष्ण में, जग एक में जगदीश में। पर इंद्रियों पर तार कर हम वीर हो अति वीर हो। कुछ कर रहे सर से सदा, निज धर्म रस गंभीर। अति शुद्ध हो आचार से, तन मन हमारा सर्वदा। अध्यात्म की शक्ति हमें पर भी नहीं कर दे झुका। इस अमर आत्मा का हमें हर श्वास मौत भी आए, सुख दुख हमसे संग रहे।
So, thanks to all participants. Before we start the session, I request, in fact, Aditya, Alokji, this Saturday webinar, as you are aware, and is basically a weekly feature of our firm, where students are only the speakers, and they are supported by guest speakers like you, as well as our in-house chartered accountants and partners, uh, help them for making the presentations and then supporting them during the webinar itself. So that is how we actually try to develop communication skills with the newcomers or next generation. Uh, so with this, I request yes, Indoria, to please introduce our today's keynote speaker, Sri Alok Garg.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Yashin Doria, and I'm happy to have the opportunity to introduce our eminent personality and experience in financial reporting, India's IFRS, and TARO. On the behalf of Kalani and Company, welcoming our guest, Dr. Alok K. Garg, sir, currently currently working as a general manager in finance and heading financial reporting and consultation vertical of large listed companies. He is a renowned author with 4 comprehensive books in his credits and a prolific speaker, having delivered more than 800 lectures on accounting standards, CARO, Schedule 3 India's IFRS, IGAP, and auditing standards at various national and international platforms. His books, Treaties on Indias and Treaties on Schedule 3, has become best-selling book consistently since 2020. Also, Dr. Garg, a seasoned professional, is a member of ICI since 2007 and qualified company secretary from ICSI in 2008. He is also diploma in IFRS from ACCA London, certified Indias and certified BRSR from ICI. He has awarded honorary doctorate in the field of financial reporting and accounting from American East Coast University, New York, USA. Also, he has been a special invitee to a prestigious accounting standard board ASB of Iceland for the financial year 2019-20 and 2020 and 21. He has been awarded with National Education Leadership Award from Ramanujan College, Delhi University in association with Indian Accounting Association. And lastly, I would like sir to please enlighten the articles with his words of wisdom. Thank you.
Shall I start?
Yeah, so I request you to please address the students on business combination.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for giving me the opportunity, and I want to wish and congratulate everyone on the 75th Chartered Accountant Day. So, fellow Chartered Accountant, Associate Chartered Accountant, and aspiring Chartered Accountant, I would say. And sir, I have seen that in the last 1.5 years. So you are following this thing as a religion, I would say. So on every weekend, there is a CS student class, and largely I have started following these activities since COVID time, right? And it not only provides an opportunity to the students about improving their communication skills, improving their interpersonal skills, but yes, it gives them knowledge also, because if you have to speak on something, you have to have a preparation for that, right? So I think that way it is very important for them, and the way you are driving the things, I think that is a kind of something which I always admire and appreciate, and even I used to discuss these things in my office as well. So coming to discuss on the topic, yes, today's topic is business combination. If I classify some standard or some topics from Indian accounting standard, I take this topic as a topic of expertise, right? There are so many chartered accountant or firms which have expertise in merger and acquisition, right? From the perspective of providing consulting, providing supporting on accounting, right? And there are many companies where this M&A is a separate vertical. So just looking into the scenario from the company's side, or scenario from the, I would say, consulting side, you can understand that what is the relevance of this particular standard Ind AS 103 business combination, right? If there is a class on valuation, this standard plays a very important role, and a lot of time, these valuation courses has also invited me to speak on Ind AS 103. So I do understand this standard is important from the accountant perspective, from the management perspective, from the valuer's perspective. So this standard is very, very, very important. And although I have 20-25 minutes to speak on this standard, and I'll talk about some key things, and I'll try to summarize the importance of this standard. When I talk about Ind AS 103, this standard is a very unique kind of standard. So when we migrated to Ind AS, so we have three kind of differences. One is carve out, the second one is carve in, the third one is removal of options. I hope my voice is audible to everyone.
Yes.
Am I perfectly clear? Okay. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So in this particular standard, so we have only one carve-in in the entire Ind AS portfolio, and this standard has one carve-in as well as carve-out. So this standard has carve-in as well as carve-out, right? So that is one, that is the uniqueness of this standard. Second, this standard actually reflect the substance with the accounting. In our earlier days, when we were using amalgamation, acquisition, right? Normally, these amalgamation and acquisitions are happening at the fair value. For example, there is a company, right? And the company has a land which is just 50 years old, and the land is getting carried at carrying value. So the acquisition cost of that land was 1 crore rupees, but that land belongs to Connaught Place, New Delhi. So now the current market price of the land is 100 crore. Now you tell me, whenever you want to sell that land, or whenever you want to sell that business, sell that entity, of course, you will ask the consideration on the basis of 100 crores, not on the basis of 1 crore, right? But in our old accounting standard 14, it gives us an option either to account for on a book value basis or to account for on a fair value basis. So one thing is very much clear. The consideration was always happening on the fair value, right? Why you will sell at a price of 1 crore when you have a value of 100 crores, right? So that cannot be the scenario. Okay. Barring some few scenario of stress sale. So it means that the transaction was always happening. The transaction was always happening on the market value, but there was an option in accounting to transact it, to account for it on the basis of book value. But in this case, in Ind AS 103, we don't have option to recognize in the books of accounts at a carrying value except a common control transaction, which I'll put some 2-3 minutes on that thing. The third one is the standard is not only restricted to the entity level acquisition. In our old days, or when we talk about IGAAP merger and acquisitions, so that AS14 is largely restricted to entity level acquisition when you are acquiring an entity, right? But this standard is also extended to from entity level acquisition to actually business acquisition. And a business could have a legal name, business may not have a legal name, right? For example, there is a chartered accountant practice firm, right? And that chartered accountant practice firm is doing a practice in M&A, merger and acquisitions, right? And there another vertical is tax vertical, the third vertical is audit vertical. And now they want to sell their M&A practice to the other firm, right? Although the other firm which is acquiring the M&A practice is not acquiring the legal entity, right? They are acquiring the knowledge, they are acquiring the employees who are the consultant, they are acquiring the client base, right? So they are acquiring the skill set. So if I talk about that particular product line or a service line, they are acquiring a service line, they are not acquiring a legal entity. But again, from the perspective of Ind AS 103, these kind of acquisition will also need to be filtered within the lens of Ind AS 103. Whether it is a business acquisition, if yes, then you have to apply the provisions of business acquisitions, right? And we have a separate standard in Ind AS 103, which guided us that how to recognize at what value it is going to be recognized, at what value it is going to be measured, what are the disclosure sort of requirement. So we need to apply the provisions of Ind AS 103 in all these areas, right? So now coming to the scope part of this standard is applicable as far as business combination is concerned. So business combination means combination of business, right? And what is meant by business combination? So when an acquirer obtains a control over the acquiree, it is known as a business combination. So there is one party who is acquirer, there is another party who is acquiree, right? And this acquirer is obtaining a control over the business of the acquiree, right? And from where we can get the definition of control. So for the definition of control, we need to see Ind AS 110, and this control definition is, I would say, very principle based definition, where you have to see the three pillars of control, that where the power lies where, exposure lies where, and whether there is an ability to influence the power to affect the returns, right? So you need to see the guidance in Ind AS 110 to establish whether acquirer is obtaining a control over the business of the acquiree. If I talk about, let's say, when an acquirer is obtaining the control over the acquiree, it is known as a business combination. And this standard, right? So, you know, there are four pillars of accounting: RMPD, recognition, measurement, presentation, disclosure. When we talk about measurement or recognition, we talk about initial recognition and measurement and subsequent measurement or subsequent recognition and measurement. So whenever the acquirer obtains a control over the acquiree, number one, on the acquisition date, which standard is applicable? Ind AS 103 is applicable. It provides us the accounting, that what is the accounting, what is the measurement provision on the acquisition date. So this standard is applicable on the initial date of the business combination, right? Initial recognition and measurement. So once acquirer obtains the control, 103 accounting has been concluded, then at every reporting date, you have to do the consolidation. And that consolidation is happening as per Ind AS 110. So Ind AS 103 is an acquisition date standard. 110 is a reporting date standard. I'll take these two standard in this manner. So again, coming back to the scope, and I'll give a practical example here with my experience, right? This standard includes all those acquisitions where there is a control, number one, right? This standard does not include where there is a acquisition of joint arrangement or joint control. So whenever the acquisition is resulting into a joint control, it's a resulting into a joint arrangement, this standard is not applicable, right? And the third one, if there is a business acquisition by the investment entity, then again this standard is not applicable, right? Now, friends, you must have read Ind AS 8, and Ind AS 8 talks about accounting policy, right? That accounting policy, accounting estimate and correction of errors. When we talk about Ind AS 8, right? So Ind AS 8 says that if there is any transaction, how you will frame an accounting policy, how will you do the recognition, measurement, presentation, disclosure. So standard says that first of all, you need to check the specific guidance, specific standard, right? And I'm part of Indus Towers Limited, and I'm heading financial reporting function there. So we had a merger, and it was one of the biggest merger of Asia, I would say, in terms of passive infrastructure, right? This two entities got merged, Bharti Infratel Limited, which was a listed entity, and Indus Tower Limited, which was an unlisted entity. Okay, so these two entities got merged, and this was a merger of a joint arrangements, right? So when we go to Ind AS 103, so first of all, we need to see that is there any standard which talks about the acquisition of joint arrangement? So we find that there is no standard. Then we went to Ind AS 103, but Ind AS 103 only talks about subsidiary acquisition, control acquisition, and it scopes out the joint arrangement kind of acquisition. So then we went to Ind AS 8. And when we went to Ind AS 8, Ind AS 8 says that first of all you need to check that whether there is a specific standard which talks about such situation. Answer is no, there is no specific standard. Then again, standard says that if there is no specific guidance, then you have to see the similar guidance. ठीक है, joint arrangement acquisition पे standard नहीं है, पर क्या acquisition पे कोई standard है? Yes, Ind AS 103 is there. So choosing the route of Ind AS 8, we went to the similar guidance, which is Ind AS 103. And when we went to Ind AS 103, it provides two kind of guidance. One, although the student speaker will discuss in detail the nitty-gritties of this standard, but just I want to set the context and I want to share my some practical experience on this standard. So this standard has two methods. One is fair value method. Second is pooling of interest method, which is in Appendix C to Ind AS 103. So drawing the analogy of a similar guidance, we have a two measurement method. One, fair value method, then your pooling of interest method. And friends, using the similar guidance approach, which is in Ind AS 8, we have referred Ind AS 103 and we have applied pooling of interest method in this acquisition of joint arrangement. The second example is Vodafone Idea Limited. The merger of Vodafone Idea Limited. Vodafone was a different entity and Idea was a Aditya Birla Group entity. So this merger happened on 30th August 2018, and this was the India's first listed entity merger on this aspect of common control transaction or pooling of interest method. The second largest merger is Indus Tower Limited and Bharti Infratel Limited, which was happened on 19th November 2020. So I would request all of you to please read the annual report of Vodafone Idea Limited for financial year 2018-19 and Indus Towers Limited for financial year 2021 to have a detailed disclosure related guidance, to have a accounting policy and how this merger has been concluded from the perspective of accounting and reporting, to have a more knowledge from the practical standpoint of view, right? So that is one. Second, when we talk about this standard, of course, I have told you the standard is not restricted to entity level acquisition. This standard is extended to the business acquisition. And when you are looking at actually it is getting fitted into a business acquisition or asset level acquisition, probably you have to check the definition of business combination as well, business as well. And what is meant by business? So the business is something where there is an inherent value to it, right? For example, there are inputs, there are processes, and there are output, right? For example, if I have a skill set, it does not mean that is a business. So whenever I'll apply my skill set to some processes and where I can have some output or outcome, probably then it will constitute as a business. मुझे Ind AS की knowledge है, क्या ये business हो गया? Answer is no. But if I'll start teaching Ind AS, probably I will have some processes, I will have some platform, right? I'll start earning, right? I have a knowledge, then all these things put together becomes a business, right? Again, it's a subjective thing. It's not like just ticking the checkbox, okay? So you need to see whether there is an input, there is a processes, and there is an ability to generate output. If these things are put together, then it will become a business. And if it become a business, then only this thing comes into picture, that how this business combination accounting has to be there. Another piece of thing is, so basically you evaluated that yes, it is a business acquisition. Then standard says that you have to apply an acquisition method. And my thing is very clear. So instead of just cramming or just reading the steps of business acquisition, think like a baniya, I would say, right? When I say baniya, means things like an entrepreneur, things like accountant, right? If there is a business acquisition, there is an acquisition method, right? Then what are the steps to follow acquisition method? Number one, किसने खरीदा? Who is the acquirer? Identification of acquirer is important. And when I say identification of acquirer, standard has given you some guidance that how you can identify the acquirer. Generally, in a very plain vanilla sense, who is the acquirer? Acquirer is someone who obtains control over the business. Acquirer is someone who is paying the consideration, right? So acquirer is someone who is paying the consideration, who is acquiring the control. So this is something where you can identify the acquirer. Number two, भाई किसने खरीदा? Number two, कब खरीदा? So what is the acquisition date? Because this date is very important because the entire consideration needs to be fair valued. Your net assets, your identifiable assets, liabilities, intangible assets, contingent liability, this entire mammoth exercise has to be happen on the acquisition date, right? So acquisition date is very, very, very important. And it is the date on which acquirer obtains control over the business. किसने खरीदा? आइडेंटिफिकेशन ऑफ एक्वायरर. कब खरीदा? एक्विजिशन, डिटर्मिनेशन ऑफ एक्विजिशन डेट. कितने में खरीदा? रोकड़ा कितना लगा? कितने में खरीदा? So what is the consideration? And friends, if I talk about consideration, there could be three kind of consideration. Number one, upfront consideration. What is meant by upfront consideration? If let's say Flipkart is acquiring Mantra, right? Or Facebook is acquiring WhatsApp. So they are saying that, see, upfront will pay you $10 billion. That is a cash consideration. Number two, deferred consideration. I'm agreeing today that, okay, I'll pay you. I'll pay you $5 billion, but I'll pay you after 2 years. Okay. So in that case, it is known as a deferred consideration. Okay. Number three is contingent consideration. Now the point is, what is meant by contingent consideration? As the word suggests, contingent means when it is depending on the happening or non-happening of some future events, right? If my entity which I have acquired, if this entity will be able to sustain the profitability or EBITDA margin of 20%, I'll pay you $5 billion additionally, right? So what is that? That is a contingent consideration. So friends, cash consideration, deferred consideration, and contingent consideration, these all are required to be fair valued, right? On the date of acquisition means if it is a deferred consideration, it has to be discounted to the present value. If it is a contingent consideration, it has to be fair valued, right? So number three is your रोकड़ा कितना पे किया, what consideration you have paid. So I think that is number three steps. Number four, if you are doing 100% acquisition, probably there will not be any non-controlling interest. But if you are doing a partial acquisition, there could be a non-controlling interest also, right? So in that case, number four, you have to identify what is your non-controlling interest, right? What is your goodwill or gain on bargain purchase? For example, you are paying 100 rupees, right? And the non-controlling interest is 20 rupees. So you are paying 100 rupees. You are acquiring a liability of 20 rupees because it will come into your consolidated books of accounts. So the total is 120 rupees and you are getting a net assets of 80 rupees. So why you are paying 40 rupees extra? Probably you are paying 40 rupees extra due to the fact that entity has some inherent future economic benefits. In future, you will get some synergies, right? So you are paying 40 rupees extra for that. So in that case, for that 40 rupees, you have to see what is my goodwill. And if I compare Ind AS 103 with accounting standard 14, normally in our accounting standard 14, we were not analyzing that what is other than goodwill for which I'm paying extra, right? When I talk about Facebook acquired WhatsApp, so WhatsApp was a very smaller entity and they have paid a big price of close to $20 billion, right? And they have a very small asset base. They have a very small employee base. So why they have paid extra 19 or $19.5 billion? So probably they have not paid extra only on account of goodwill. They have paid extra for that customer base. They have paid extra for the potential, customer level agreements or the benefit which they will receive from the subscriber base. Okay. So friends, you need to bifurcate between the goodwill and the other intangible asset. So that is number four. And in case your consideration is lower than the value of the net assets acquired, it may lead to a gain on bargain purchase. And here there is a carve out, right? IFRS says that if there is a gain on bargain purchase, please take it to the P&L. But we said that how we can take it to the P&L. Number one, it is a capital nature of profit. Number two, it is not in the ordinary course of business. Number three, if we will take it to the P&L, probably there could be a nexus between the acquirer and acquiree, right? To take it to the P&L, the money can be diverted to the promoters in terms of the P&L, right? So we in India has told IASB that please, we will not take it to the P&L. We will take it to the other comprehensive income, or we will take it to the capital reserve in the statement of changes in equity. So this is where we have taken a carve out. OK. And number 5. So of course, you need to calculate NCI, gain on bargain purchase, goodwill, right? So you have to do all these things. And sorry, number 4 was then you need to recognize and measure net assets, right? What is your net assets, right? Then you need to recognize and measure your goodwill, gain on bargain purchase or NCI, right? So number 1, किसने खरीदा, कब खरीदा, कितने में खरीदा, क्या खरीदा, measurement of net assets. And number 5, क्या goodwill और gain on bargain purchase है उस transaction में. So these are the 5 steps of acquisition method. Now this standard also touches upon the requirement of reverse acquisition. And in India recently, there was a transaction which was happened between the Radiant Group and Max Healthcare Group. So that transaction was largely a reverse acquisition kind of a transaction, right? And we have also seen the example of ICICI Bank. We have also seen the example of this Air Deccan, right? So these are the examples of reverse acquisition where the accounting acquirer will be the legal acquiree and the legal acquirer will be the accounting acquiree, right? So the standard also touches upon the concept of the reverse acquisition. And apart from these things, the standard talks about the measurement period, because when there are two big acquisitions, for example, we have done this acquisition between Indus Star Limited and Bharti Infratel Limited. This cannot happen over a night. Okay. So a lot of valuations are required and it will take a time. So the standard allows you a measurement period of 1 year. Okay. So for example, if you are into the month of February and you are a listed company, you have to close your books of accounts maximum within 60 days from the end of the year. Standard says that take a notional value and do your notional business combination accounting and just close your year end, right? We are providing you 1 year, 1 year window is open. Do all your exercise complete within 1 year, and whatever actualization is there, take the impact in the next year. Okay, so that is something which is given in Ind AS 103. Now coming to the pooling of interest method. So what is that? Now we in India, when we migrated to Ind AS on 16 February 2015, somehow we are moving from AS 14 to Ind AS regime, Ind AS 103 regime. 103 says that please take it everything to the fair value, right? But the point is, how fair is the fair value, right? And we have a legacy and we are habitual of, applying this book value method, and we seems that book value is a very easiest way of doing the accounting. Rather, somehow I'll not agree with that book value is always the easiest way of accounting, because it is not reflecting the substance over the form, right? So but when at Accounting Standard Board, and I had a privilege of, being a special invitee of Accounting Standard Board for the 2 years in 1920 and 2021 and a part of the ITFG Bulletin Group when this 2015 Ind AS came. So then the discussion was started happening when we were finalizing our Ind AS that, if there is a common control transaction, and to be honest, what is meant by common control transaction in my layman language, and I explain this common control example in a way like grandfather has not changed, but father has changed. Pitaji badal gaye, but dadaji nahi badle. This is the meaning of common control transaction in my way. So common control transaction is a transaction where the ultimate control lies with the same entity or same group, right? Although the immediate control has been changed, right? So even before and after the acquisition, this entity becomes a part of the same group or same entity, right? So Dadaji remained the same, grandfather remained the same, but father has been changed. Father becomes an uncle or uncle becomes a father. So friend, in this kind of cases where there is an entity acquisition within the group, probably, of course, there is a nexus. They are in a well positioned way. They are in a well I would say, in a very good position to influence the entire transaction, right? So in this case, what we have decided, we have said that if there is a common control transaction, we will not apply this fair value method. We will apply pooling of interest method. What does it mean? It means we will not change the color of assets, liabilities, and reserves, right? We will carry the asset, liability, and reserves at the book value, right? And whatever is there, right? So whatever difference is there, because difference may be there, because there is actual consideration which is getting transferred. So whatever difference is there, either it will be goodwill or it will be a negative goodwill. Okay. So it will be a goodwill or it will be a negative goodwill. If it is it will not be a capital reserve. It will be a, sorry, either it will be a capital reserve or it will be a negative capital reserve. This goodwill will be the negative capital reserve, right? And when you look at Vodafone Idea and Bharti Infratel Industar, you'll find this thing, right? So friends, we have taken a carve-in, right? We have inserted some additional guidance in Appendix C to Ind AS 103 in terms of common control acquisition, where we have inherited this pooling of interest method from our accounting standard 14, accounting for amalgamation. And this is how we have finalized Ind AS 103. So friends, this is what I can summarize in 20-25 minutes or 30 minutes about Ind AS 103. If you have any question, so I will be happy to answer from my knowledge and experience is concerned. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. Yeah, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Alok.
Hello. Am I audible? I'm not able to hear anyone.
Hello. Yeah, you are
Hello. Yes.
able to hear.
Yeah. Now I'm able to hear you, sir.
So thank you, Alokji, in fact, for summarizing the entire Ind AS 103. In fact, as and when such classes are there, I used to basically have at a glance reading of the standard before the start of the class. But today somehow I was actually engaged somewhere else and could not read the relevant details from the Ind AS 103. But when I heard you today, I found that the entire recap has been done by you, whatever I know about the Ind AS 103. So it is really good to hear from you about Ind AS 103 business combination transactions. And of course, for all the students, though Alokji may have summarized it in half an hour, whatever are the contents of the Ind AS 103 are there. But if we have to go into the details of the Ind AS 103, there are a lot of things which we need to understand about them. And our speakers have, of course, prepared about the Ind AS 103. So many FAQs they must be taking up out of the institute's guidance available with us. So I request them to please go through whatever presentations they have made, and wherever required, I will be supporting. And Alokji, since we have discussed that you have certain appointments at 4 p.m. with your doctor,
Doctor,
so
yes, sir.
I would relieve you as per your convenience.
Thank you, sir.
So
And
thank you very much for.
I wanted to attend this session, but somehow, the doctor appointment scheduled at 4, unfortunately. So, and the doctor is there till 4:30. So I have to I have to leave this session. One thing I wanted to say, sir, when I'm looking at the number of audience or participants, it is more than 40. So somewhere it is more than a study circle meeting, I would say.
In fact, there are 50 participants online and around 20 participants in the conference room. So total
Oh,
number is 70.
big number, sir, big number.
So yes. So
Thank you,
thank you,
sir.
Alokji. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Now we can.
And thanks, Aditya ji, for being here. So good to have you again in the session, and my best wishes to all the students and aspiring chartered accountant. Thank you so much. Bye bye. Take care.
So now we can continue with your presentations. उसको शेयर करना पड़ेगा. Share the screen. Yes, it is coming. But वहाँ पे क्या? और क्या? Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to wish you all a very happy CA Day. On behalf of all three of us, I would like to say thank you to Bhupendra sir for giving us an opportunity to present a class on
आज इन सबकी छुट्टी गड़बड़ हो गई. हैं? अरे तो सीए डे के दिन तो सीए वाला काम करना चाहिए ना, छुट्टी थोड़ी होगी. हैं? सेलिब्रेशन. इससे बढ़िया क्या सेलिब्रेशन है कि अपन पढ़ाई कर रहे हैं.
डॉक्टर डे डॉक्टर और सीए डे दोनों वहाँ पे बनना था सफाई से डोनेशन.
कोई बात नहीं, doctors are also working today.
डॉक्टर्स सेलिब्रेट कर रहे हैं या तुम्हारे को सेलिब्रेट करवा रहे हैं? वहाँ पे काम कर रहे हैं ना डॉक्टर्स.
तो देखिए
हाँ तो तेरे में है ही कितना ब्लड. चलो लेट्स स्टार्ट.
So, as already mentioned, today's class topic is India's 103, that is business combination. I will be covering the topics objective and scope of India's 103, identifying the business combination, definition and elements of business, option concentration test, acquisition method, measurement period, and purchase consideration. Objective of India's 103. So 103 provides principles and requirements for how the acquirer will recognize and measure identifiable assets acquired and liabilities assumed, recognize and measure non-controlling interests in the acquiring, recognize and measure the goodwill acquired in the business combination or a gain from bargain purchase, and disclosure requirements. So these objectives are what we will be covering in the next 20 to 30 minutes in this class. Scope of India's 103. So as the name suggests, business combination, it tells us about accounting for acquisition of a business. But there are certain exclusions in India's 103. As Sir had already mentioned, it does not include accounting for formation of a joint arrangement and acquisition of an asset or a group of assets that does not constitute a business of does not constitute definition of a business. Does not come into the definition of business, that is asset acquisition. Now, though IFRS 3 does not include accounting for common control transaction, Appendix C of Index 103 will include it. Identifying a business combination. An entity shall determine whether a transaction or other event is a business combination by applying the definition in this index, which requires asset acquired and liabilities assumed constitute a business. Why does this index emphasize so much on identifying whether it is business acquisition or not? Because when we talk about index always suggests accounting from substance point of view and not from legal point of view. So it may be possible that from legal point of view, it may come up like it is an acquisition of business. तो ऐसा हो सकता है कि लीगल पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से लगे कि वो एक्विजिशन ऑफ बिजनेस है, बट इन रियलिटी वो एक्विजिशन ऑफ असेट है. तो इंडेक्स हमेशा सब्सटेंस के अकॉर्डिंग अकाउंटिंग बताता है, नॉट फ्रॉम लीगल पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू. इसलिए वी हैव टू आइडेंटिफाई वेदर इट इज एन एक्विजिशन ऑफ बिजनेस और एन एक्विजिशन ऑफ असेट. नाउ फॉर दैट द ग्रुप ऑफ असेट्स should satisfy the definition of business, then only its acquisition would be called a business combination. Definition of business according to Index 103. And definition of business, an integrated set of activities and assets that is capable of being conducted and managed for the purpose of providing goods and services to customers on generating investment income, interest, dividend, or any other income from ordinary activity. Now, this is a definition given in Index 103, which we can understand in a more better way if we divide the elements of business into three parts. First element is input, second process, third is output. Inputs are any economic resource that is capable of or already creating output when one or more processes are applied to it. So economic resource has to be a non-current asset. उसी पे process लग सकता है. So it can be any non-current asset, whether tangible or intangible. It can be any of them. Process. Process could be any system, standard, rule, or policy or method of the acquiring, which it applies on an input and that helps in generating an output. However, the process should be a substantial process and not common processes like accounting process, payroll process. It should be a substantial process like strategic management process, optional process. Equal to the typical for an organization, or it cannot be replicated. Or even if we are replicating that process, it includes a lot of cost. So the acquirer, if the acquirer is acquiring such a process, then only it will be included in the definition. Otherwise, it would be a common process and not included over here. Third is output. Output is a result of input and process applied. That is, it is a good or service which helps an entity to gain economic resources. Here, the organization, the acquiree, should be capable of generating output. It doesn't matter if it is generating output right now, it should be capable of doing it. So that is because of this, even if an acquirer is gaining control over an entity that is at its development stage, then also it will be business acquisition. It can be a business acquisition because they are capable of generating output. It doesn't matter if they are generating it right now. There's an example of business. You have to identify whether it would be a business or acquisition of assets. Company D is a developing stage pharma company that has a license for a new drug. Final clinical trials are currently being performed by Company D's employees, one of whom founded Company D and discovered the drug. It has a plan to eventually produce the drug. Company D's administrative and accounting functions are performed by contract employees. Company C acquires all the shares of Company D and retains its employees, whether Company D represents a business. If anybody of you would like to answer. We have to look at three elements: input, process, and output, and all the three elements should be present, then only it will be a business. And then only its acquisition will be business combination. Why no? Would you like to explain it?
That eventually
Input
produce
is the new drug.
output.
The process acquired credit. They are retaining the employees.
Output.
पर ना आउटपुट अभी होना जरूरी नहीं है, बट दे आर प्लानिंग टू जनरेट इट. तो बाद में प्लान करें तो भी हम आउटपुट तो ले ही रहे हैं ना, कैपेबिलिटी ले रहे हैं. कैपेबिलिटी टू जनरेट आउटपुट हमें मिल रहा है, वो अभी नहीं कर रहे हैं, वो चलता है, बट कैपेबिलिटी है. और इनपुट इज द न्यू ड्रग and they are acquiring all, they are retaining all the employees. And in research and employees are an important process, because you cannot replicate their knowledge without incurring a lot of cost. So it would be a business as it has all the three elements. Next.
तो अब इसको थोड़ा बिजनेस को और डिस्कस करते हैं. तो जैसे इन्होंने एक अभी एग्जांपल दिया रिगार्डिंग ए कंपनी हैविंग द लाइसेंस फॉर ड्रग एंड इट इज इनटू द क्लिनिकल ट्रायल एंड दे विल एबल टू जनरेट द रेवेन्यू आउट ऑफ दैट. एज 14 के अंदर जो भी आपने इंटरमीडिएट में पढ़ा, तो वहां पे बेसिकली एक कंपनी का मर्जर दूसरी कंपनी में हो रहा है और उसकी अकाउंटिंग करनी है. ये डिस्कस अपन ने एज 14 में किया है. यहाँ पर ऐसा नहीं है ना. जैसे इन्होंने यहाँ पे कहा कि साहब कंपनी सी ने जो है ऑल ऑफ द शेयर्स एक्वायर कर लिए. एक कंपनी किसी दूसरी कंपनी के सारे शेयर्स एक्वायर कर लेती है, तो इज इट ए बिजनेस? डिपेंड्स. बाकी सब लोगों का क्या व्यू है? अगर एक कंपनी दूसरी कंपनी का सारे शेयर्स एक्वायर कर लेती है, तो ये बिजनेस एक्विजिशन है या नहीं है? बिजनेस कॉम्बिनेशन है या नहीं है? है क्या? दैट इज द क्या है
It
ये?
will depend upon the definition of business. It should satisfy the definition of business.
First-
then only it will.
First you should see whether that company owns a business or not. अभी एक सिंपली एक कंपनी आपने एक्वायर कर ली, उसमें कोई एसेट भी नहीं है, लायबिलिटी भी नहीं है, आपने शेयर्स एक्वायर कर लिए बस, तो इज इट ए बिजनेस कॉम्बिनेशन? एक कंपनी है, उसके अंदर उसने 1 करोड़ रुपए कैपिटल लगाई और एक लैंड खरीद ली, और उस कंपनी को किसी और ने उस कंपनी के शेयर्स खरीद लिए दूसरी कंपनी में, तो इज इट ए बिजनेस कॉम्बिनेशन? है ना. इट इज सिंपली एन एक्विजिशन ऑफ द एसेट्स, क्योंकि वो उस पर्टिकुलर कंसोलिडेशन होगा उसका, ऐसा नहीं कि कंसोलिडेशन नहीं होगा, बट बिजनेस कॉम्बिनेशन अकाउंटिंग नहीं होगी. दैट इज द डिफरेंस. तो केवल कंपनी के शेयर्स एक्वायर कर लिए तो इसका मतलब ये नहीं कि आप बिजनेस एक्वायर कर रहे. कंपनी के शेयर्स एक्वायर कर लिए और उस कंपनी में कुछ एसेट है, सो दैट डजंट मीन दैट यू हैव एक्वायर्ड ए बिजनेस. अभी एक कंपनी के सपोज देयर आर 7-8 प्लांट्स, और उन प्लांट्स में से किसी दूसरी कंपनी ने एक प्लांट को खरीद लिया, शेयर्स एक्वायर नहीं किए. व्हाट दे हैव एक्वायर्ड इज a plant. They have not acquired the company, they have acquired the plant. So is it a business acquisition? क्यों? स्पीकर, ये बिजनेस है क्या?
Asset acquisition.
आप पूरा का पूरा प्लांट एक्वायर कर रहे हो, रनिंग प्लांट. 7 सीमेंट प्लांट है, साथ में से कंपनी ने कहा कि एक ये रनिंग प्लांट है, इसको हम बेच देते हैं किसी और कंपनी को, क्योंकि ये हमसे नहीं संभाला जा रहा. ऐसा हो सकता है ना? दैट इज ऑल्सो बिजनेस कॉम्बिनेशन, क्योंकि उन्होंने, आप जो कह रहे हो ना, वापस तीनों हो जाओ उस पर. तो इनपुट, प्रोसेसेस एंड आउटपुट. इनपुट है ना, वहाँ प्लांट है, मशीनरी है, लेबर है, सब लोग हैं, है ना. प्रोसेसेस है, क्योंकि रनिंग प्लांट है तो प्रोसेस इसके बिना कैसे रनिंग प्लांट होगा? आउटपुट है, मैं कह रहा हूँ कि रेवेन्यू जनरेट हो रहा है, सीमेंट बन रही है और वो सेल हो रही है और आउटपुट है, सेल हो रहा है. So how it is not a business? It is also a business combination. तो बिजनेस कॉम्बिनेशन को आप सबसे पहले तो ये भूल जाओ कि किसी पर्टिकुलर कंपनी के शेयर्स परचेज कर लिए तब बिजनेस कॉम्बिनेशन. इट इज नॉट लाइक दैट. इट इज एंटायरली ए डिफरेंट कॉन्सेप्ट. आपको ये देखना पड़ेगा किसी पर्टिकुलर अकाउंटिंग को देखते हुए, बिजनेस की अकाउंटिंग को देखते हुए. अगर कोई पर्टिकुलर पर्सन लैंड की सेल और परचेज कर रहा है और उस कंपनी को आपने परचेज कर लिया, इट मे बी बिजनेस कॉम्बिनेशन. केवल लैंड पड़ी है, आपने कुछ भी केवल उस कंपनी के शेयर्स परचेज कर लिए, इट वाज ओनली एन इन्वेस्टमेंट बाय दैट कंपनी इनटू दैट लैंड. दैट इज नॉट ए बिजनेस कॉम्बिनेशन. So what you have to see is that what you are actually acquiring, whether it is a combination of assets or it is a business, in term of in line with this definition of business. ये बहुत ही इंपॉर्टेंट एस्पेक्ट है. जब कभी भी आप ये डिसाइड करोगे, मे बी इन योर एग्जाम्स और मे बी समवेयर एल्स प्रैक्टिकली, तो आपको ये देखना पड़ेगा कि जो अक्वायर किया है वो बिजनेस है या नहीं है. अगर आपने ये गलत ये गलत डिसीजन ले लिया कि साहब ये बिजनेस है, जबकि वो नहीं है, और वाइस वर्सा, देन you will decide for a wrong accounting. इसको अब आप आगे देखिए.
So one method to identify whether it is a business acquisition or an asset acquisition was if the asset satisfies the definition of business. Another would be we can apply option concentration test. It is, as the name suggests, it is option. A company may elect to use it. They can also use the definition of business to identify. Option concentration test is given in para B78, B70B in Index 103. It is used to assess whether the purchase consideration primarily acquisition of asset and not a business. इसमें हम क्या करते हैं, हम परसेंटेज कैलकुलेट करते हैं सिंगल असेट की, एंड उसमें देखते हैं कि अगर हमारा परचेज कंसिडरेशन का एक बहुत ज्यादा पार्ट सिर्फ सिंगल असेट के लिए है तो उसे बिजनेस एक्विजिशन नहीं माना जाएगा, उसे असेट एक्विजिशन मानते हैं. तो कंपनी अगर ऑप्ट करती है ओसीटी अप्लाई करने के लिए और ओसीटी पास होता है तो बिजनेस एक्विजिशन नहीं होगा, वो असेट एक्विजिशन होगा, क्योंकि एक मेजर पार्ट हमारे परचेज कंसिडरेशन का उस असेट के लिए जा रहा है, सिंगल सब्सटेंशियल असेट के लिए जा रहा है. अगर वो फेल हो जाता है तो हमें फिर से डेफिनेशन लगानी पड़ेगी बिजनेस की, देखने के लिए कि वो एसेट एक्विजिशन है या बिजनेस एक्विजिशन है. फॉर्मूला फॉर ओसीटी is equal to single substantial asset divided by gross value of asset into 100, and यहाँ पे single substantial asset की वैल्यू फेयर वैल्यू दी जाती है. ग्रॉस वैल्यू ऑफ एसेट कैसे कैलकुलेट होता है, परचेज कंसिडरेशन प्लस लायबिलिटीज. This liabilities does not include DTL but includes NCI less cash and cash equivalent less deferred tax asset. Another method to calculate gross value of assets would be we can take various assets excluding DTA, cash and cash equivalent, but it will include goodwill, which is computed ignoring DTL effect. Now comes the acquisition method. Acquisition method has 4 steps. First step is identifying the acquirer. Second, determining the acquisition date. Third, recognizing and measuring the identifiable assets required, the liabilities assumed and non-controlling interest in the acquiring. Fourth is recognizing and measuring goodwill or a gain from bargain purchase. First step, identifying the acquirer. So, identifying the acquirer, this was given in consolidation index 110. So if anybody of you would like to explain when when it will be said that an entity has acquired control over an entity? If anybody of you would like to define control. This was taught in the last class in consolidation 110, definition of control.
40%.
60%.
And there's the power to influence the decisions or the major decisions of the business.
Yeah, we can say that when it has power over the investors, exposure or right to exposure and right to variable returns from its involvement, and ability to use its power of the investee to affect the amount of investors' return. In short, we can say that if an entity has acquired the right to influence the dividend decision making of another entity, then it will be said to have acquired control over that entity. And that right generally comes when an entity has more than 50% shares of an entity. Now, ways of acquiring control. Suppose there is a company A which intends to acquire control over entity B. So they have various ways in which they can acquire control. First is A can acquire majority shares of B Limited, that is more than 50% shares of the entity. A can absorb company B. A can merge and combine with B to form a new entity C, in which in the company C the majority shares are held by the company A. Then it would be said that A has control over entity C. A acquires a business segment of B. B transfers one of its business segment to another entity B, which is controlled by A. That is, A has indirect control over B. B issues further shares of A Limited, giving control stake to A. That is, A can acquire control over B in step acquisition. Second is date of acquisition. So generally, the date of acquisition is the date on which the acquirer gains control over the acquiree, and that is generally the closing date. Now, what is closing date? Closing date is the date on which the acquirer has transferred the consideration and it has assumed assets and acquired liabilities of the entity. That would be the closing date. However, if there is a written agreement between the acquiree and the acquirer, the date of acquisition can be before the date of closing date. An acquirer shall consider all pertinent facts and circumstances in identifying the acquisition date. However, if the NCLT approves a scheme with a date, different appointed date as compared to the acquisition date, as per Index 103, acquisition date is the appointed date as approved by the NCLT. अगर इंडेक्स अकॉर्डिंग जो डेट ऑफ एक्विजिशन है उसके अलावा एनसीएलटी ने कोई और डेट दे रखी है तो वी विल हैव टू कंसीडर दैट डेट फ्रॉम अकाउंटिंग पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू. So there is a question on it. Company ABC Limited and Company XYZ Limited are manufacturers of rubber components for a particular type of equipment. ABC Limited makes a bid for XYZ's business and the Competition Commission of India announces that the proposed transaction is to be scrutinized to ensure that competition laws are not breached. Even though the contract are made subject to the approval of the CCI, ABC Limited and XYZ Limited mutually agree the terms of the acquisition and the purchase price before Competition Authority clearing the software. Can the acquisition date in this situation be the date on which the ABC Limited and XYZ Limited agree the terms even though the approval of CCI is awaited? So if anybody of you would like to answer, what would be the date of acquisition in this case? Yeah, because in this case, approval of CCI is pertinent, so we have to consider it. Third would be identifiable net assets. Third set is. So this was already covered in detail in consolidation, so I would be giving you an overview of it. The assets and liabilities are recorded at fair value on the date of acquisition. So fair value in case of assets would be the date on which, would be the value at which it can be sold, or a liability can be settled in an ordinary business transaction. That is, fair value is market derived valuation. Classification and recognition of net assets required to be based on the intended use of the parent, irrespective of classification by subsidiary. इसका एक एग्जाम्पल है. सपोज एक्वायरी के पास एक बिल्डिंग है विच इट इज यूजिंग फॉर इट्स ओन पर्पस. तो उसने अपनी बुक में एज अ पीपी दिखा रखा होगा, बट एक्वायरर इज गोइंग टू यूज दैट सेम बिल्डिंग टू रेंट इट आउट. तो उसके लिए वो इन्वेस्टमेंट प्रॉपर्टी हो जाएगी. तो जब वो एसेट्स आइडेंटिफाई करेगा, अपनी बुक में एक्वायर करेगा, तो उसका एज अ इन्वेस्टमेंट प्रॉपर्टी दिखाएगा, ना की बिल्डिंग. बिकॉज जो भी अकाउंटिंग पॉलिसी एक्वायर हुई है उसके अकॉर्डिंग अकाउंटिंग होगी. Now, date of acquisition के दिन assets and liabilities की fair value ली जाती है, but it is a tedious task to calculate fair value. तो Indus हमें 1 year का period देता है, जिसमें from date of acquisition से 1 year का period देता है, जिस तक हम हमारी value of assets and liabilities revalue कर सकते हैं. तो on the date of acquisition हम provision fair value देंगे and 1 year तक हम उसको revalue कर सकते हैं, but उसके बाद नहीं कर सकते. Recognition and measurement of NCI. So NCI can be calculated using two methods. First is proportionate net asset level, that is identifiable net assets into percentage of NCI. Fair value method. In case of proportionate net assets method, the goodwill will be partial goodwill, and in fair value asset method, it would be a full goodwill. Types of NCI. So NCI are of two types: qualifying NCI and non-qualifying NCI. Qualifying NCI, equity shares with the NCI holders would be termed as qualifying NCI, and otherwise convertible preference share capital and compound financial instrument with the NCI holders would be called as non-qualifying NCI. The topic of goodwill and BPG is also included in consolidation, so I would be giving you a quick recap of it. Goodwill is the difference when the purchase consideration plus NCI exceeds identifiable net assets, then goodwill will be recognized. It means that we have purchased the business at a higher value. Now, the goodwill that is identified on the date of acquisition cannot be remeasured, except in the case when during the measurement period we have revalued the fair value. Otherwise, goodwill cannot be remeasured, and at the end of every year we have to check it for impairment as per Indus 36. Business purchase gain. In extremely rare circumstances, it is possible that the acquirer has gained control over the acquiry at a low price. That is, when the identifiable net assets exceeds the purchase consideration in NCI. Now, when an acquirer has sold off their business at a lower price, we can call it as distress sale. If we know the reason for distress sale, the amount of business purchase gain, which we call as capital reserve in AS 14, will be transferred to OCI reclassification, and then it will be transferred to equity. But if we do not know the reason for such distress sale, it would be directly transferred to equity as capital reserve. Now, there come types of consideration. So consideration can be in the form of cash. Now, when I can pay the cash immediately, or it can be paid over a period of time. So when it is paid over a period of time, it is called deferred consideration. And on the date of acquisition, such purchase consideration would be calculated at its present value. Consideration can be in the form of equity or debentures and other financial instruments. Now, third is contingent consideration. By contingent consideration, we mean that when the purchase consideration will be paid only on happening or non-happening of certain future uncertain events. So on the date of acquisition, it will be valued at fair value. Now, the contingent consideration can be paid in the form of cash or asset. So the acquirer will account for it as a financial liability in his book. It can also be paid in the form of equity. So the acquirer will account it as equity, contingent consideration. Now, on the date of acquisition, we have recorded contingent consideration on fair value. And when the time comes when we finally pay the contingent consideration, there is a difference between that period. And suppose the fair value of such contingent consideration gets revised. So on the date when we finally pay contingent consideration, the fair value of such liability and equity will not be revised. In case of financial liability, it will be adjusted from P&L, and in case of equity, it cannot be remeasured. Now, there is a question on purchase consideration that I would like you all to try. On 1st April 2016, A Limited acquires 100% interest in B Limited. As per the terms of agreement, the purchase consideration is payable in following three tranches. A cash consideration of INR 50 lakh, INR 10 lakh payable immediately, and balance payable equally in 2 years. Discounting factor is 15%. And immediate issuance of 10 lakh shares of A Limited having fair value of INR 10 rupees per share. Further issuance of 2 lakh shares after 1 year is the profit before interest and tax of B Limited for the first year following acquisition exceeds INR 1 crore. The fair value of the shares of A Limited on the date of acquisition is INR 20 per share. Further, the management has estimated that on the date of acquisition, the fair value of contingent consideration is INR 25 lakh. During the year ended 31st March 2017, the profit before interest and tax of B Limited exceeds INR 1 crore. As on 31st March 2017, the fair value of shares of A Limited is INR 25 rupees per share.
This first,
What would be the cash consideration in this question? Deferred consideration, if there is some deferred. Yeah. We will discount it using 15%. Is there any contingent consideration in it? What is fair value? So there is cash consideration of 10 lakh rupees. Deferred cash consideration of 40 lakh rupees, which is payable in 2 years. So we will take the present value of it using 15% discounting factor. The fair value of shares issued is 10. There were 10 lakh shares and the fair value was given as 20. It would be 2 crore rupees. Fair value of contingent consideration would be 25 lakhs. So the total purchase consideration would be 2 crore 67 lakh 51,000 rupees. Now it is given that during the year, after the end of the period, the company has achieved its targets. So the contingent consideration is being paid, but we will not remeasure its value on 31st March 2017. Now I would like to call Suhani for taking the class further. Thank you so much, Neena.
share this link. अच्छा इस स्लाइड पे इन्होंने लिखा है एक्सेप्शन टू द रिकॉग्निशन प्रिंसिपल, रिकॉग्निशन और मेजरमेंट प्रिंसिपल. सो व्हाट इज द रिकॉग्निशन एंड मेजरमेंट प्रिंसिपल? ये बता दिया आपने?
But these are exceptions for identifiable net assets. How do we record identifiable? Normally, identifiable net assets are recorded at fair value, but there are certain exceptions to it which she will be covering.
अभी आपका आया नहीं है इसमें. शेयर हो रहा है कि हाँ हो रहा है?
So I'll be covering exceptions to the recognition of measurement principles. The the exception principles laid out in the standard for recognition or measurement of certain assets and liabilities are only limited to the date of acquisition and may be different than the requirement of other accounting standards. And this will let us to the two scenarios. One is an asset or liability which otherwise would have been not have been recorded gets recorded, or an asset or liability are measured at a value other than the acquisition date fair value.
इससे पहले अपन रिकॉग्निशन प्रिंसिपल को समझते हैं इंड AS 103 का, क्योंकि वो मुझे लगता है थोड़ा डिटेल में शायद कहीं नहीं डिस्कस हुआ कि जितनी भी एसेट्स और लायबिलिटीज है बिजनेस को अक्वायर करते हुए, दैट शुड बी रिकॉग्नाइज्ड एज ऑन द डेट ऑफ एक्विजिशन बाय द अक्वायरर। तो उसको आइडेंटिफिकेशन कैसे करोगे, क्या एसेट्स और लायबिलिटीज है, व्हाट आर दोज एसेट्स एंड लायबिलिटीज, जो अक्वायरी की बुक्स में है वो वाली एसेट्स एंड लायबिलिटीज, या कोई और भी हो सकती है। कुछ अनरिकॉर्डेड एसेट्स और लायबिलिटीज भी हो सकती है जो अक्वायरी की बुक्स में नहीं है। तो जैसा इन्होंने कुछ डिस्कस किया था आलोक सर ने, कस्टमर रिलेशनशिप्स, जब आपने किसी को कंसीडरेशन का पेमेंट किया तो एट दैट टाइम यू हैव थॉट कि सर कुछ पेमेंट तो मैं ये सारी टेंजिबल एसेट्स के अगेंस्ट में कर रहा हूं, बट देयर आर सर्टेन पेमेंट्स जो कि मैं गुडविल के अगेंस्ट में या कुछ इंटेंजिबल एसेट्स के अगेंस्ट में कर रहा हूं। अब वो कुछ पेमेंट्स हैं जो दिख ही नहीं रहे कि किसके अगेंस्ट में है। तो हो सकता है कहीं ऐसा नहीं हो कि आप उसका पूरा का पूरा अगेंस्ट गुडविल कर दो सारे के सारे पेमेंट को। देयर मे बी सर्टेन अदर इंटेंजिबल एसेट्स आल्सो फॉर व्हिच यू हैव मेड द पेमेंट, और वो जनरली वो वाली इंटेंजिबल एसेट्स अक्वायरी के केस में इंटरनली जनरेटेड एसेट्स होगी, क्योंकि अक्वायरी ने क्या किया ओवर ए पीरियड। अभी जैसे मेरे पास में मेरा एक फोन नंबर है ना, 9829888810, आपको बताने के लिए नहीं है, पता चला आप मैसेज कर दोगे कि ये नंबर अब एयरटेल के लिए क्या हो गया, एक कस्टमर हो गया ना। आई एम हैविंग दिस नंबर फॉर लास्ट मोर देन 2 डिकेड्स, तो उनके लिए एक नंबर हो गया ना कि यार ये नंबर है ना कंसिस्टेंटली इज विद द एयरटेल, तो ये कस्टमर जो है वो एयरटेल के साथ है। पोर्टेबल होके किसी और के पास चला गया तो हो सकता है उसके साथ आ गया। So that relationship is there by me with the Airtel. तो एयरटेल किसी दिन अपने आप को, जैसे एयरटेल और किसी का आपस में बिजनेस कॉम्बिनेशन ट्रांजैक्शन हुआ, तो इवन दिस नंबर, इवन दिस कस्टमर विल बी वैल्यूड फॉर द पर्पस ऑफ एक्विजिशन। या आपके पास में 10 लाख कस्टमर्स ऐसे हैं, 50 लाख कस्टमर ऐसे हैं, या 5 करोड़ कस्टमर्स ऐसे हैं जो आपके साथ जुड़े हुए हैं, तो उसका भी एक वैल्यूएशन हो सकता है। कुछ पेटेंट्स हो सकते हैं जो कि कंपनी ने जब करवाए थे तब एक नॉमिनल कॉस्ट इनकर करके और उन्होंने हो सकता है वो पेटेंट्स हासिल किए थे, या कुछ लाइसेंसेस हासिल किए होंगे, या कुछ और इंटेंजिबल एसेट्स उन्होंने ली होगी, बट देयर वैल्यू मे बी डिफरेंट। तो हो सकता है उस वक्त उन्होंने रिकॉग्नाइज ही नहीं किया हुआ हो अपनी बुक्स के अंदर। तो वो आपको देखने चाहिए कि ऐसी एसेट्स तो नहीं है जो कि इन्होंने रिकॉग्नाइज नहीं की हुई है, या कुछ एसेट्स जो कि उनकी बुक्स में रिकॉग्नाइज्ड है लेकिन होनी नहीं चाहिए। आप जब बिजनेस एक्वायर कर रहे हो तो हो सकता है उन एसेट्स का कोई वैल्यू नहीं है। कोई टेंजिबल एसेट्स ऐसी हो सकती है कि उनकी बुक्स के अंदर तो कुछ पर्टिकुलर अमाउंट पे पड़ी है, लेकिन आप सोच रहे हो कि यार इसका तो मैं तो जाके और कुछ और ही काम करने वाला हूँ, इसका कोई वैल्यू नहीं है मेरे लिए, तो उसको आपको डी रिकॉग्नाइज भी करना। तो ये दिस इज द रिकॉग्निशन प्रिंसिपल। नाउ व्हाट इज द, तो अभी ये जो डिस्कस करेंगे वो इसके एक्सेप्शन डिस्कस करेंगे कि किसको रिकॉग्निशन नहीं करना है। नाउ व्हाट इज measurement principle. What is measurement principle? Yes. As on the date of accounting, it should be fair valued. जितनी भी assets हैं और जितनी भी liabilities है, उनका fair value आपको देना है और जो purchase consideration का payment है, उसका भी fair value आपको निकालना है. And then you will be computing either goodwill or not capital reserve, gain on bargain purchase. तो ये मेजरमेंट प्रिंसिपल है जो इंडेस 103 में दिया हुआ है. अब इस प्रिंसिपल के एक्सेप्शंस क्या है वो ये डिस्कस करें.
So the first exception goes for a contingent liability. As of acquisition date, the acquirer shall recognize contingent liabilities assumed in the business combination if it is a present obligation that arises from past events and its fair value can be measured reliably. So as per India's 37 provisions, contingent liabilities and contingent assets, it is contrary from the India's 37th recognition about contingent liabilities. In India's 37, it is said that if the present obligation that arises from past events is probable, then only it will be recognized. But as this is an exception that if it is measured reliably, even if it is not probable, then also we will have to consider the contingent liability. The example for the same is a suit for damages worth 10 million was filed on Company B for breach of certain contract provisions. Company B has disclosed the same as contingent liabilities in its financial statements, as it considered that it is a present obligation for which it is not probable that the amount would be payable. Company A acquires Company B and determines the fair value of contingent liabilities to be 2 million. So in this case, the Company A would recognize 2 million in its financial statement as a part of acquisition accounting. But as per the India 37, it is not probable. But as an exception, we will account this as an acquisition accounting.
तो कंटीजेंट लायबिलिटी को भी आप फेयर वैल्यू करके जब इंडेस 103 में बिजनेस कॉम्बिनेशन अकाउंटिंग करोगे तो आप अकाउंट फॉर करोगे एज ए लायबिलिटी. इंडेस 37 में क्या होता है? कंटीजेंट लायबिलिटी को अपन अकाउंट फॉर करते हैं? नहीं करते.
So वो probable होती है.
If it is contingent liability, we do not account for. Moment it is into the definition of contingent liability, Index 37 does not require us to account for. This is clear. Index 103 says कि कोई बात नहीं, contingent liability है ना, अगर वो probable है तो उसका fair value आप recognize करिए. तो Index 37 में recognize नहीं कर रहे हैं, लेकिन acquisition date of accounting में आपको उसको as a contingent liability account for करना. So that is why it is an exception.
So income taxes, the acquirer shall recognize and measure a deferred tax asset or a liability arising from the asset in accordance with India's 12 income tax assets and not at the fair value. So as we know that measurement principles says that everything should be measured on fair value, but this is an exception that it should be measured as per India's 12. Same goes with employee benefits. The acquirer records the fair value of the obligations for any post-retirement obligations as per the principles of India's 19, which is an exception to the general fair value rule. Assets held for sale. The acquirer shall measure an acquired non-current asset or disposal group that is classified as held for sale at the acquisition date in accordance with India's 105 non-current assets held for sale and discontinued operations at fair value less cost to sell in accordance with paragraph 15 to 18 of that India's. So in as per the big business combination in India's, it should be recorded at fair value less cost to the sale. Then next exception is indemnification assets. So anyone can explain what is indemnification? What are indemnification?
गर्व indemnification assets क्या आते हैं, नाम से ही बताते कुछ।
जैसे सबसे बुक वैल्यू 20 लाख है इसको एग्जांपल, अपन ने फेयर वैल्यू करा इसको 15 लाख में, कंपनी कह रही है कि हमारा इतना वैल्यू फेयर वैल्यू एसेट्स का उतना नहीं है, तो कंपनी उसको गारंटी दे रही है एक्वायरर को कि आप 15 लाख से जैसे 70 लाख दे रही है, 70 लाख से आपको रिकवर हो जाएगा। कंपनी ने तो फेयर वैल्यू इसको 15 लाख करा, जो डिफरेंस है 70 लाख और 15 लाख का वो इंडेमनिफिकेशन एसेट्स रिकवर करेंगे। तो अगर 15 लाख तक अपन को क्लाइंट से डेब्टर से आ गए तो 15 लाख से रिकवर करेंगे और 2 लाख से एक्वायरी से रिकवर करेंगे।
तो बेसिकली कंपनी जो है अक्वायरी जो है वो कह रहा है कि साहब हम आपको इंडेमनीफाई कर देंगे अगर आप इसको इतना रिकवर नहीं कर पाते।
So it is basically a kind of guarantee provided by the acquiree. Sorry. Again, the seller in a business combination may contractually indemnify the acquirer for the outcome of a contingency or uncertainty related to all parts of a specific asset or liability. An example for this will be the seller may indemnify the acquirer against losses above a specified amount, as Bhaiya said, on a liability arising from particular contingency. As a result, the acquirer obtain an indemnification asset. The indemnification asset may be recognized, has to be recognized at the same time that it recognizes the indemnified item. So, indemnified item वो item हो गया जिसके ऊपर अपन indemnification asset बुक कर रहे हैं। ठीक है, अगर आपको लगता है कि आज एक एसेट का प्राइस मान लो 15 लाख है, जैसे मैंने बोला, और तो वही है कि इंडेमनिफाइड आइटम वो एसेट हो गया पर्टिकुलर जिसका वैल्यू 15 लाख है, पर उसके ऊपर का जो 2 लाख होगा वो अपना इंडेमनिफाइड एसेट होगा। At the same time that it recognizes the indemnified item and it should be measured on the same basis as the indemnified item. Here comes an illustration. ABC Limited acquired a beverage company, PQR Limited, from XYZ Limited. And at the time of the acquisition, PQR Limited is the defendant in the court case whereby certain customers of PQR Limited have alleged that the products contain pesticides in excess of the permissible levels that have caused them health damage. तो PQR के अगेंस्ट केस चल रहा है कि कस्टमर बोल रहे हैं कि एक पेस्टिसाइड प्रोडक्ट है जिससे हेल्थ डैमेज हो रहा है। PQR Limited is being sued for the damage of ₹2 crores. XYZ Limited has indemnified ABC Limited for the losses, if any, due to the case for amount of ₹1 crore. The fair value of the contingent liability for the court case is 70 lakhs. How should ABC Limited account for the contingent liability and the indemnification asset? What is the fair value of the liability? What if the fair value of the liability is 1.2 crore instead of 70 lakhs?
क्या हुआ?
तो बेसिकली सही है, आइडेंटिफाइबल लाइबिलिटी होगी एंटिटी की 70 लाख की और वही सेम इंडेमनिफिकेशन एसेट बन जाएगा क्योंकि अपना 1 करोड़ तक का कवर हो रहा था, पर 70 लाख के तो 70 का 70 इंडेमनिफाइड बन जाएगा। एंड अगर अपना 1.2 करोड़ का लाइबिलिटी होता फेयर वैल्यू तो अपना इसमें 1 करोड़ ही इंडेमनिफिकेशन एसेट होता और बाकी 1.2 करोड़ की लाइबिलिटी होती। Next exception is intangible assets. Accounting for intangible assets. The acquirer shall recognize separately from goodwill the identified intangible assets acquired in business combination. And now question arises कि भाई identified intangible assets क्या होते हैं? तो identifiable intangible assets are those assets if they meet the criteria of separability or contractual legal criteria. तो अगर ये दो क्राइटेरिया फुलफिल हो रहा है तो एक इंटेंजिबल एसेट आइडेंटिफाइबल इंटेंजिबल एसेट है एंड तभी उसको अपन गुडविल से अलग रिकॉग्नाइज करेंगे. The separability criteria means that an acquired intangible asset is capable of being separated or divided from the acquiree and sold, transferred, leased, rented, or exchanged, either individually or together with the related contract, identifiable asset, or liability. The example for the same goes like customer and subscriber lists are frequently licensed and thus met the separability criteria. And intangible asset meets the separability criteria even if it is separable in combination with related contract, identifiable asset or liability. तो जैसे ये जो अपन सब्सक्रिप्शन वगैरह लेते हैं या अपन कोई भी मेलिंग लिस्ट वगैरह सब्सक्राइब करते हैं, तो अगर अपन बहुत कोई पर्टिकुलर, जैसे आजकल तो हर जगह मेलिंग लिस्ट सब्सक्राइब होती है, आप सब्सक्राइब कर लो आपके पास मेल्स आ जाएंगे, पर कुछ पर्टिकुलर आप अच्छी वेबसाइट्स पे आप करते हो तो उनकी मेलिंग लिस्ट को लाइसेंस करवा लेते हैं, तो वो डेटा बाहर नहीं हो सकता, तो वो डेटा सेपरेटली बेच सकते हैं, तो वो सेपरेशन क्राइटेरिया मीट करता है, तो वो एक इंटेंजिबल एसेट हो गया जिसको हम गुडविल से अलग रिकॉग्नाइज करेंगे. An intangible asset that meets the contractual legal criteria is identifiable even if the asset is not transferable or separable from the acquiree or from other rights and obligations. अब contractual legal criteria ये हो गया कि इसका एक example होता है if we have an operating lease where acquiree is lessee under favorable terms. Another example for the same is unfinished research and development of acquiree on date of acquisition but useful for acquirer can be recognized as intangible asset at fair value in process research asset. तो ये अपन अलग से नहीं निकाल सकते, पर ये इंटेंजिबल एसेट की क्राइटेरिया को मैच कर रहा है क्योंकि ये कॉन्ट्रैक्चुअल और लीगल फाउंडेशंस के अंदर आता है. अब there can be certain items which cannot be identifiable under separation criteria, separability criteria, or contractual legal criteria. So these items will be subsumed in goodwill and not recognized separately. The example for the same is assembled workforce or customer loyalty. Next exception comes for leases. So, what if acquiree is a lessee? The acquirer shall recognize right of use assets and lease liabilities for lessee identified in accordance with Ind AS 116. इसमें the acquirer is not required to recognize right of use assets and lease liabilities for which the lease term ends within 12 months of the acquisition date, or even if lease for which underlying asset is of low value. The acquirer shall measure the lease liability at the present value of the remaining lease payments, as if the acquired lease was a new lease at the acquisition date. The acquirer shall measure the right of use asset at the same amount as the lease liability, adjusted to reflect favorable or unfavorable terms of the lease when compared with market terms. And when the acquiree is a lessor, in measuring the acquisition date fair value of the asset, the acquirer shall take into account the terms of the lease. The acquirer does not recognize a separate asset or liability if the terms are of an operating lease are either favorable or unfavorable when compared with market terms. Assembled workforce. So हमने ये पढ़ा था कि मतलब अभी कुछ इंटेंजिबल एसेट्स जो कि सेपरेबिलिटी क्राइटेरिया नहीं मीट करते हैं और लीगल एंड कॉन्ट्रैक्चुअल क्राइटेरिया भी नहीं मीट करते, वो गुडविल के साथ सक्षम हो जाते हैं, मतलब गुडविल में ऐड हो जाते हैं. तो assembled workforce is one of the non-identifiable intangible asset. The acquirer subsums into goodwill the value of an acquired intangible asset that is not identifiable as the acquisition date. For example, an acquirer may attribute value to the existence of an assembled workforce. अब assembled workforce क्या होता है? Assembled workforce is an existing collection of employees that permits the acquired to continue to operate an acquired business from the acquisition date. The assembled workforce is not an identifiable asset to be recognized separately from goodwill. Any value attributed to it is subsumed into the goodwill. Next exception is reacquired rights. Anybody of you who will want to explain what is reacquired right? अब reacquired rights ये हो गया कि एक एक्वायरर ने एक्विजिशन से पहले ही कुछ राइट्स मतलब कोई इंटेंजिबल एसेट के राइट्स एक्वायरी को दे रखे थे, तो उन राइट्स को जब अपन बिजनेस कॉम्बिनेशन करेंगे तो रीएक्वायर्ड राइट्स बोलेंगे और we'll see now that how they will be accounted for.
जैसे आपने कोई फ्रेंचाइजी बिजनेस में आपने और आपने अपनी ही फ्रेंचाइजी किसी और को दे रखी है, ठीक है, और अब आपने उसी बिजनेस को अक्वायर कर लिया, तो दैट इज रीएक्वायर्ड राइट्स. आप ही के राइट्स आपने किसी और को दिए हुए हैं एज ए फ्रेंचाइजी, अब उस बिजनेस को आपने अक्वायर कर लिया, तो यू हैव रीएक्वायर्ड योर ओन राइट्स बाय वे ऑफ दिस पर्टिकुलर बिजनेस कॉम्बिनेशन. तो उसको क्या करना है, यहाँ पे दिया हुआ है.
These are the rights which the acquirer before acquisition may have granted to the acquirer.
Or some license have been given to use those. Yes.
May have granted to the acquirer to use certain assets which belong to the acquirer. The acquirer shall measure the value of reacquired rights recognized as an intangible asset on the basis of the remaining contractual term of the related contract. अब मान लो अपन ने किसी को 5 साल के लिए एक राइट दिया था, अब वो अपन सेकेंड ईयर के एंड में अपन उसी बिजनेस को एक्वायर कर रहे हैं, बिजनेस कॉम्बिनेशन कर रहे हैं, तो जो बचा हुआ कॉन्ट्रैक्चुअल टर्म है 3 साल का, उसी के बेसिस पे अपन इसकी वैल्यू रिकॉग्नाइज करेंगे.
आप उसका फेयर वैल्यू नहीं करोगे, बल्कि जो भी टर्म्स उसकी है बेसिस दैट यू विल वैल्यू. दिस इज एक्सेप्शन टू द मेजरमेंट प्रिंसिपल. मेजरमेंट इज व्हाट? फेयर वैल्यू. तो कुछ रिकॉग्निशन एक्सेप्शन है, कुछ रिकॉग्निशन मेजरमेंट एक्सेप्शन है, कुछ केवल मेजरमेंट एक्सेप्शन. ये आपको लिस्टिंग करनी चाहिए.
The acquirer shall measure the value of the required rights on the basis of remaining contractual term of the related contract without considering the effect of potential renewals when measuring its fair value. If the term of the contract giving rise to reacquired right are favorable or unfavorable related to the term of the current market transactions for the same or similar items, the acquirer shall recognize the settlement gain or loss. अब फेवरेबल और नॉन फेवरेबल इसमें कैसे हो जाएगा? मान लो अपन ने एक राइट पहले किसी को 5 करोड़ में दिया था एंड आज उसकी मार्केट प्राइस अपनी 7 करोड़ की हो रही है, ठीक है, तो जब आप वापस रीएक्वायर कर रहे हो राइट को, तो ये तो आपका फेवरेबल हो गया, पर आज अगर उसकी मार्केट प्राइस कम हो रही है तो जो अपना जो लॉस होगा वो अपना अनफेवरेबल हो जाएगा, तो ये गेन और लॉस को तुमको रिकॉग्नाइज करना है. Separate transactions. So business combination को अकाउंट को करने के लिए कुछ ट्रांजैक्शंस होते हैं और कुछ ट्रांजैक्शंस होते हैं जो इसमें नहीं कंसिडर है, तो we'll talk about those transactions. Entered into by on behalf of the acquirer और
तो ये पहले कह रहे हैं कि मतलब जब बिजनेस कॉम्बिनेशन करते हैं तो कुछ ट्रांजैक्शंस जो होते हैं दे आर रिलेटेड टू द बिजनेस कॉम्बिनेशन, उसकी अकाउंटिंग आपको इंड AS 103 के तहत करनी है, लेकिन उसके साथ साथ कुछ रिलेटेड ट्रांजैक्शंस दूसरे भी होते हैं, है ना. जैसे मान लो आगे जाके कोई रिस्ट्रक्चरिंग करेंगे, उससे रिलेटेड कुछ हुआ है, तो वो बिजनेस कॉम्बिनेशन ट्रांजैक्शन का पार्ट नहीं है, उसकी अकाउंटिंग इंड AS 103 के हिसाब से नहीं करेंगे. या कोई प्री एग्जिस्टिंग रिलेशनशिप So that may not be the part of the business combination transactions. वो एक separate transactions अलग से चल रहा है. So it should not form part of the business combination transactions. कि वो fair value करके और उसका consideration ये सब calculate करके होना चाहिए. So these things.
Transactions entered into by or on behalf of the acquirer or primarily for the benefit of the acquirer or combined entity rather than primarily for the benefit of the acquiree before the combination is likely to be a separate transaction. Following are the examples of the separate transactions that are not to be included in applying the acquisition method. A transaction that in effect settles pre-existing relationships between the acquirer and acquiree. We'll discuss that in the next slide. A transaction that remunerates employees or former owners of the acquiree for future services. It will be covered. And transactions that reimburses the acquiree or its former owners for paying the acquiree's acquisition-related costs. So, pre-existing relationship between the acquirer and the acquiree. The acquirer and acquiree may have a relationship that existed before they contemplated the business combination as a pre-existing relationship. A pre-existing relationship between acquirer and acquiree may be contractual or non-contractual. Examples for contractual relationships can be a vendor or customer or licensor, licensee, and a non-contractual can be plaintiff, dependent. If the business combination in effect settles a pre-existing relationship, the acquirer recognizes a gain or loss measured as follows. If a so we'll understand this through the help of a flowchart. If a pre-existing relationship is non-contractual, it will be measured through fair value. And when it is contractual relationship, it will be considered on the value will be lesser of the stated settlement provisions or favorable or unfavorable contract positions. We'll understand both of these terms through an example. And if the amount of gain or loss recognized may be depend in the part of whether the acquirer had previously recognized the related asset or liability and reported gain or loss thereof may differ from the amount calculated by applying the above requirements. This is illustration. ABC Limited acquires PQR Limited for the consideration of 1 crore. 4 years ago, ABC Limited had granted a 10-year lease allowing PQR Limited to operate in Europe. The contract of the license was of 2,50,000. The contract allows either party to terminate the franchisee at a cost of the unexpired initial fee plus 20%. At the date of acquisition, the settlement amount is 1,80,000. ABC Limited has acquired PQR Limited because it sees high potential in European market and wishes to exploit it. ABC Limited calculates that under current economic conditions and at current prices, it could grant a 6-year franchisee for a price of 4,50,000. How is the license accounted as a part of business combination? तो सबसे पहले कंसिडरेशन 1 करोड़ की है. अपना लाइसेंस का रिमेनिंग लाइसेंस 10 साल का था और 4 साल एक्सपायर हो गया था. रिमेनिंग टेन्योर 6 साल का है. और उसके बाद अब ये बोलना चाह रहे हैं कि द कॉन्ट्रैक्ट अलाउज ईदर पार्टी टू टर्मिनेट फ्रेंचाइजी एट अ कॉस्ट ऑफ अनएक्सपायर्ड इनिशियल फी प्लस 20%, जो कि अगर अपन प्रोपोर्शनेट करें 6 साल के हिसाब से तो 1,80,000 का होएगा. तो इट सेज दैट कॉन्ट्रैक्चुअल ऑब्लिगेशंस, स्टेटेड सेटलमेंट प्रोविजंस या फिर फेवरेबल.
सबको बताना क्या डाउट है या क्या क्लैरिफिकेशन क्या वो पूछ रहा है. आंसर डिस्कस कर रहे हो तो बताओ क्या आंसर है. आंसर नहीं है फिर अब तो कोई चीज हमें भी बता दिया करो ना, ताकि आपस में घुस करते रहो।
अब ये कहते हैं कि सेटलमेंट प्रोविजंस या फिर फेवरेबल और अनफेवरेबल कॉन्ट्रैक्ट पोजीशन लेसर ऑफ द अमाउंट विल बी कंसिडर्ड एज विल बी रिकॉग्नाइज्ड for the relationship. At the so
फिर
यहाँ
ये
पे
आपको काफी डिटेल में इसको पढ़ना पड़ेगा टू अंडरस्टैंड द एंटायर बिजनेस कॉम्बिनेशन में जितने भी एक्सेप्शंस और ये सब चीजें हैं विद एग्जांपल्स।
based on the above instant case, the license is recognized at 4,50,000, the fair value at market rates of the license based on the remaining contractual life. So, first of all, when we consider the gain or loss on settlement of the contract, it will be lower of 30 lakh, which is amount, 3 lakh, which is amount by which the right is unfavorable, and to ABC Limited compared to market terms. This is basically the difference between the amount ABC could receive for granting a similar right, which is 4,50,000, compared with the carrying value, which is 1,50,000, if you proportionate it with the 6 years remaining term. And less of 3 lakh and 1,80,000, which is basically the amount ABC has to pay to terminate the right at the date of acquisition. The loss on settlement of contract is 1,80,000. Therefore, out of 1 crore paid, 98.2 lakh is accounted for consideration for business combination, और फिर बचा हुआ 1,80,000 is accounted separately as a settlement of loss on the acquired right.
अभी आधे घंटे में खत्म हो जाएगा यार, दे देना तो है 5 बजे तक है। इसको सुनोगे ना यार, ये इतनी तैयारी करी है इसने है। यूट्यूब पे सुनोगे तुम लोग पता? एक बार और सुन लेना यूट्यूब पे। अभी किसका है, मैं अभी उसको बोल देता हूँ अनिल को, उसको क्या नाम है, ब्रांच चेयरमैन को कि यार थोड़ी देर रुकना है। कितने बच्चे हो? 7-8 बच्चे हो ना। 1 मिनट रुक जाओ, अभी बोल देता हूँ उसको। अरे विष्णु जी ये ब्लड डोनेशन कब तक है? 5:30 तक है ना? ठीक है, 7 बच्चे आएंगे हमारे यहाँ से, 5:30 तक वेट करना है। यार तेरा बिजनेस कॉम्बिनेशन बढ़ेगा तो थोड़ा खून बढ़ेगा, तो थोड़ा अच्छे से दे पाएगा। चलो तो चालू कर। भाई कौन है? ठीक है।
Contingent payment to employee shareholders. Contingent payments to employees or shareholders. The acquirer should consider the following indicators to identify if the contingent consideration in the business combination, if it is a contingent consideration or a separate transaction. The indicators are continuing employment.
Wait a second.
So that is
तुम्हारे को ब्लड डोनेट कराने की पूरी तैयारी है हमारी।
duration of continuing employment, level of remuneration. If the level of remuneration is high, then the contingent it may indicate that the contingent payment are additional consideration rather than the remuneration. Incremental payments to employees, other agreements and issues. Now we'll go to the next topic.
So I think तेरा conclude कर दे, इनको आने दे ताकि इसका भी है ना। We have Aditya ji also. Aditya ji, I think you have to leave now if you want to.
Yes, Mantri
Yes,
ji.
sir.
I'll be leaving in 2 minutes. But it's an excellent program.
Okay, if you want to add anything to the speeches by the speakers.
Yeah, I just had one question, Mantri ji. It's suppose if I have a wholly owned subsidiary, for example, right? And I prepare a consolidated financial statements for that wholly owned subsidiary. But if in a scenario I acquire the business of that wholly owned subsidiary and prepare a standalone statement after considering the effect of this standard and the common control transaction, would the balance sheet look any different? Am I audible? Mantri ji, am I audible?
Yes, you are audible. So what I understood from your query, Aditya ji, is that there is an wholly owned subsidiary.
Yes.
And the parent company, instead, though it has already 100% shares with us, but it did a separate transaction with the wholly owned subsidiary and acquired the business of wholly owned subsidiary, entire business of wholly owned subsidiary.
No. I'm giving two scenarios. Scenario A, if I prepare a consolidated balance sheet of my wholly owned subsidiary with myself, vis-a-vis the company acquiring the business entirely of the subsidiary B and preparing a standalone, would these two balance sheets look anyway different?
No, of another subsidiary.
No. Say scenario A holds B. Okay, first scenario, company A holds company B 100%, and I prepare consolidated balance sheet AB. Right. Second scenario, company A acquires company B, again its wholly owned subsidiary, and accounts the transaction under common control transactions. Right. So when it acquires its entire business, there is no question of consolidation. It is only standalone. Correct?
Yes.
So whether the standalone A after acquisition is equivalent to hypothetical case of consolidated balance sheet of A and B.
I think yes.
Because we are seeing business as a same entity, business as a
If
whole.
it is a common control transaction, yes.
Because the reason I'm asking this, I was also exploring the other educational material. Now that IFRS 3, which is going to be amended, they are planning to have this common control transaction in their standards now. So I was looking for some material on this.
Okay. So based on this carve-in by the ICI.
Yes. Otherwise, I have no other question. It's a wonderful session, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Now we have Kushi with us to discuss reverse acquisition.
Good afternoon all. Now I will cover reverse acquisition. In this slide, I will be covering review of reverse acquisition, non-controlling interest, consideration, EPS calculation, and accounting clarification. Reverse acquisition, meaning a reverse acquisition occurs when the entity that issues security, that is a legal acquirer, is identified as acquiring for the accounting purposes on the basis of guidance in paragraph B13 to B18. A company is issuing its securities to other companies, which is a legal acquirer, and actually for accounting purposes is recognized as legal acquiring. The entities whose equity interests are acquired, the legal acquiring must be acquired for the accounting purposes. The legal acquirer is surviving legal entity in reverse acquisition. जो लीगल एक्वायरर होता है यानी अकाउंटिंग एक्वायरर, वो सर्वाइविंग लीगल एंटिटी होती है रिवर्स एक्विजिशन में, और ये अपनी फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट कंटिन्यू करती है इशू करने के। द फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट आर जनरली नेम ऑफ लीगल एक्वायरी। लीगल एक्वायरी की नेम से होता है क्योंकि वो अकाउंटिंग एक्वायरर होता है। In absence of a change in name, the financial statement remain labeled as those of surviving legal entity. जो भी surviving legal entity होता है उसकी नेम से अपन फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट को इशू करते हैं। And now we'll conclude non-controlling interest. In reverse acquisition, some of the owners of legal acquiring, the accounting acquirer, may not be exchanged their equity interest for equity interest of the legal parent, accounting acquiring. Those owners are treated as non-controlling interest. Reverse acquisition में क्या होता है कि legal acquiring जो होते हैं, जो कि accounting acquirer होता है, उसके कई owners होते हैं जो अपने शेयर्स को sacrifice नहीं करते हैं या दूसरे शेयर्स कंपनी के शेयर्स एक्वायर नहीं करते हैं, तो उन्हें non-controlling interest कहते हैं। वो जो नॉन कंट्रोलिंग इंटरेस्ट होता है वो रिजर्व्स और जो कि नेट एसेट्स होते हैं वो लीगल एक्वायरिंग या अकाउंटिंग एक्वायरर के ही रिलेटेड होते हैं और इंटरेस्टेड होते हैं। Conversely, even though legal acquirer is acquiring for accounting purposes, the owners of legal acquirer have interest in the reserves and net assets of the combined entity. लेकिन जो लीगल एक्वायरर होता है उनके जितने भी शेयर होल्डर्स होते हैं उनमें रिजर्व्स और जो नेट एसेट्स होते हैं दोनों के अंदर इंटरेस्ट होता है कंबाइंड एंटिटी में। Asset and liabilities of legal acquiring are measured and recognized in the consolidated financial statement as a free combination carrying amount. जो legal acquiring है, यानी accounting acquirer, उसकी जितनी भी assets और liabilities होती हैं, उनकी जो free carrying amount होती है, तो combination से पहले की, उसी को हम उनसे consolidated financial statement से दिखाते हैं। Therefore, जो reverse acquisition में non-controlling interest होता है, वो reflect करता है non-controlling shareholders proportionate interest in the free combination carrying amount of legal acquirers net assets. Even if non-controlling interest in other acquisition are measured as their fair value. हम usually जो non-controlling interest होता है उसको fair value पे measure करते हैं, but यहाँ पे हम उसको उस basis पे नहीं करते, उनसे proportionate basis पे ही measure करते हैं consolidated में। Consideration in reverse acquisition. In reverse acquisition, the accounting acquirer usually issues no consideration. Usually consideration issue नहीं किया जाता है कोई। Instead of accounting acquiring usually issues its equity shares. यानी जो accounting acquiring है यानी legal acquirer वो अपनी issue करता है shares accounting acquirer को। Accordingly, the acquisition rate fair value of consideration transferred by the accounting acquirer for the interest in accounting acquiring is based on the number of equity interest the legal subsidiary would have to issue to the owners of legal parent of the same percentage equity interest in the combined entity that results from the reverse acquisition. मतलब अगर हम कंसिडरेशन को मेजर करेंगे तो किस बेसिस पे करेंगे जो शेयर्स उसे इशू करने पड़ते हैं लीगल एक्वायरर को, लीगल एक्वायरी को। The fair value of the number of equity interest calculated in this way can be used as fair value of consideration transferred in exchange for the acquired. अब इसका एक एग्जांपल है, इधर आप सब लोगों से करो और टाइप करो सॉल्व करने का।
चला गया।
पढ़ लिया? तो सबसे पहले तो आप लोग ये बताइए कि हम कंसिडरेशन किसके बेसिस पे मेजर करेंगे, मतलब कंपनी बी के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से या कंपनी ए से। कंपनी बी के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से या कंपनी ए के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से किसी भी The fair value consideration effectively transfer should be measured based on the most reliable measure. Because company B is a private company, the fair value company A share is likely to be more reliable. Assuming the company A fair value is more reliably measured, the consideration effectively transferred would be to measure using the market price of company A share. अब कंपनी ए के बेसिस पे हम ले रहे हैं तो हम कंपनी ए के शेयर्स के बेसिस पे लेंगे और कंपनी ए की जो फेयर वैल्यू है वो है 16 पर शेयर, जो कि मल्टीप्लाई करेंगे शेयर्स को जो कि ओन बाय कंपनी ए शेयर होल्डर्स ऑफ द न्यूली कंबाइंड एंटिटी। अब न्यूली कंबाइंड एंटिटी में कंपनी ए के शेयर होल्डर्स 40% ओन करते हैं यानी 100 शेयर्स, और 100 शेयर्स को अगर आप 16 से मल्टीप्लाई करेंगे यानी $1600 कंसिडरेशन। EPS calculation. In a reverse equation, the financial statements of combined entities reflect the capital structure, that is share capital, share premium, and treasury capital of legal acquirers, accounting expiry, including interest issued in connection with reverse equation. इसमें जो शेयर कैपिटल स्ट्रक्चर आता है, ठीक है, रिवर्स इक्वेशन में वो कंबाइंड एंटिटी का ही रिफ्लेक्ट होता है। In calculating the weighted average number of common shares outstanding, the denominator of the EPS का denominator होता है वो किस तरीके से कैलकुलेट करते हैं ये लिखा हुआ है। The number of common shares outstanding from the beginning of the period to the acquisition date shall be computed on the basis of weighted average number of common shares of legal acquired. जो number of common shares हैं outstanding beginning date से वो हम कैसे बेसिस पे कैलकुलेट करेंगे, weighted average number shares जो कि legal acquired यानी accounting acquired है outstanding during the period multiplied by exchange ratio, swap ratio. The number of common shares outstanding from the acquisition date, ये तो पहले हो गया था beginning से acquisition date। अब acquisition date से end of the period अगर हम कैलकुलेट करेंगे तो करेंगे actual number of common shares of the legal acquirer, जो legal acquirer है यानी accounting acquirer की जो actual number of shares है उसके बेसिस पे हम कैलकुलेट करते हैं। The basic EPS for each comparative period before the acquisition date presented in the consolidated financial statements following the reverse acquisition shall be calculated by dividing A by B. A क्या होगा, इनकम, जो कि एट्रिब्यूटेबल होती है लीगल एक्वायरी की, एट्रिब्यूटेबल टू कॉमन शेयरहोल्डर, कॉमन शेयरहोल्डर को जो भी इनकम अवेलेबल है वो डिवाइडेड बाय जो भी हमने वेटेड एवरेज नंबर ऑफ शेयर्स निकाले। एक एग्जांपल है ईपीएस कैलकुलेशन, ठीक है, आप पढ़ो। ईपीएस हम निकालते हैं तो जैसे यहाँ पे लिखा हुआ है, यहाँ पे एग्जाम कंपनी के शेयर्स बना रखे हैं, कंपनी की प्राइवेट कंपनी जो कि एक्वायर करी कंपनी ए को पब्लिक कंपनी को रिवर्स एक्विजिशन में। इमीडिएटली बिफोर एक्विजिशन में कंपनी ए के शेयर्स हैं 100 और कंपनी बी के हैं 60। कंपनी बी के आउटस्टैंडिंग शेयर 60 जो है अनचेंज रहते हैं, ठीक है। ऑन सितंबर 30 एक्विजिशन डेट पे कंपनी ए इशू कर रहा है शेयर्स 150 इन एक्सचेंज ऑफ कंपनी बी के 60 शेयर्स, यानी स्वैप रेशियो है 2.5 का। अर्निंग्स फॉर कंसोलिडेटेड एंटिटी कितनी है $800। अब ईपीएस हम निकालेंगे तो नंबर ऑफ कॉमन शेयर आउटस्टैंडिंग कंपनी बी कितने थे 60, एक्सचेंज रेशियो कितना है 2.5, तो नंबर ऑफ शेयर आउटस्टैंडिंग कितना होगा एक्विजिशन डेट तक के, स्टार्टिंग से एक्विजिशन डेट के 150 होता है। अब नंबर ऑफ शेयर आउटस्टैंडिंग फ्रॉम द एक्विजिशन डेट से लेकर पीरियड एंड तक वो भी 250, तो वेटेड एवरेज नंबर कितना हो गया 150 को 9/12 से कर देंगे और 250 को 3/12 से, मंथ प्राइस पीरियड प्राइस तो 175 और अर्निंग पर शेयर था 800, तो इनको डिवाइड कर देंगे तो ईपीएस आ जाएगा $4.57। अब अकाउंटिंग क्लैरिफिकेशन से रिवर्स एक्विजिशन, एक्वायरर एक्वायरी तो हम समझ चुके हैं। Who should meet the definition of business, ये मीना ने एक्सप्लेन किया था। अब ट्रीटमेंट ऑफ नेट एसेट्स ऑफ लीगल एक्वायरी या अकाउंटिंग एक्वायरर। नेट एसेट्स ऑफ लीगल एक्वायरी और अकाउंटिंग एक्वायरर नॉट रीस्टेटेड फ्रॉम प्री कैरिंग अमाउंट, प्री कॉम्बिनेशन कैरिंग अमाउंट, उनको रीस्टेट करने की जरूरत नहीं है। नेट एसेट्स होते हैं लीगल एक्वायरर यानी अकाउंटिंग एक्वायरी को, इसको आपको रिकॉग्नाइज भी करना होता है, मेजर भी करना होता है अकॉर्डिंग टू इंडियस 103 के प्रिंसिपल्स के हिसाब से जो आप पहले कर चुके हैं। कॉमन कंट्रोल ट्रांजैक्शन, जैसा आलोक सर ने पूछा था, कॉमन कंट्रोल ट्रांजैक्शंस में कि जो अल्टीमेट पेरेंट कंपनी होती है वो सेम ही रहती है, तो जो इंटरमीडिएट होती है वो चेंज हो जाती है। India's 103 has defined common control business combination as a combination in which all combining entities of business are ultimately controlled by the same person, मतलब सेम पर्सन ही कंट्रोल करेगा बिफोर और आफ्टर कॉम्बिनेशन। फोर कॉम्बिनेशन भी सेम हमारा पेरेंट हो और एक बार भी सेम ही रहेगा, एंड सच कंट्रोल इज नॉट ट्रांजिटरी इन नेचर। It further states that company may be said to be under the control of another entity or individual or a group of them when they exercise the right to govern its financial statement and operating policy. आप किसी के भी राइट के अंदर सिर्फ ऐसे नहीं आते कि आपके पास शेयर्स हैं उसके, मतलब मैं 60% होल्ड कर रही हूँ इसलिए अगर मेरे पास जैसे उसकी कंट्रोलिंग पावर थी, ऑपरेटिंग पॉलिसी को लेके, फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट्स को लेके, तो मेरे पास उसकी कंट्रोलिंग पावर आता है। अकाउंटिंग ट्रीटमेंट अंडर कॉमन कंट्रोल ट्रांजैक्शन। India's 103 prescribes application of pooling of interest method to account for common control business combination. Pooling of interest method apply होता है business combination से. All identified assets and liabilities will be accounted as their carrying amounts. No adjustment would be need to reflect their fair value. आपको carrying amount के लिए उनको कंटिन्यू करना होता है, उनकी fair value में कोई adjustments नहीं आते हैं. Balance of routine earning in the books of acquiring entity shall be merged with that of the acquiring entity and identifier of reserves shall be preserved. Any difference whether positive or negative shall be adjusted against capital reserves. आपको कैपिटल रिजर्व से अगेंस्ट एडजस्ट करना होता है, कोई नेगेटिव और पॉजिटिव रिजर्व में, और बाकी जितनी भी रिटेन अर्निंग है उसमें दोनों की कंबाइन करके एक साथ कंसोलिडेट करके दिखाई जाती है. Hence no goodwill can be recorded in books of under common control transaction. Common control transaction में कोई भी goodwill रिकॉर्ड नहीं करते. प्रैक्टिकल चैलेंजेस, ये एक एग्जांपल है. मैसेज ABC पेरेंट कंपनी जिसकी दो सब्सिडियरीज हैं, CQR और XYZ. CQR एक डीमर्ज एंटिटी है जो कि एंटर करती है बिजनेस डीमर्जर में. ट्रांजैक्शन विद मेथड्स XYZ. ये बिजनेस ट्रांसफर टेक्निक मतलब कॉमन कंट्रोल ट्रांजैक्शन है. ये कॉमन कंट्रोल ट्रांजैक्शन है क्योंकि दोनों ही सब्सिडी ABC की हैं. तो अगर उन दोनों के बीच में कोई भी ट्रांजैक्शन आता है तो अल्टीमेट पेरेंट ABC की होती है. ठीक है. अकाउंटिंग में क्या होगा, डीमर्ज कंपनी के रिटेल्स करके हम उसकी बुक वैल्यू मतलब हमने देखी है कि आपको बुक वैल्यू पे लेके आना है दोनों को, और गुडविल रिकॉर्ड नहीं है. फंड अरेंजमेंट, ट्रांसफर ऑफ कंट्रोल. फंड अरेंजमेंट आप पूरा इंडेक्स नहीं करते हैं, बट यहाँ पे एक बिजनेस कॉम्बिनेशन से रिलेटेड थोड़ा बहुत पॉइंट है जो मैं आपको बता रही हूँ. When an entity acquires an interest in joint operation in which the activity of joint operation constitutes a business as defined in India's 103, it shall apply to the extent of the share in accordance with paragraph 20 of all the principles on business combination accounting in India's 103 and other Indias do not conflict. मतलब जितनी भी इस इंडेक्स के रिक्वायरमेंट्स हैं वो जॉइंट अरेंजमेंट को अप्लाई होनी चाहिए अगर इसकी जितनी भी स्कोप वो फॉल कर रहा है इंडेक्स 103 के अंदर, बट उतनी ही अप्लाई होंगी जितने की कॉन्फ्लिक्ट ना कर जाए इंडेक्स 103 के प्रिंसिपल के साथ. Decoding the differences. अब इंडेक्स और IFRS.
So I think let's conclude today क्योंकि इतना इजी नहीं है इसको. जब मैंने पढ़ा था तो आई टुक 14 days टू स्टडी द एंटायर इंडेक्स 103 और मैंने अपना पहला भाषण दिया था IFRS पे बॉम्बे में, तो मैंने बिजनेस कॉम्बिनेशन पे दिया था. तो बस वो अंडे टमाटर नहीं पड़े मेरे ऊपर, ऐसा भाषण था. इट इज नॉट इजी टू कैप्चर दिस पर्टिकुलर स्टैंडर्ड until and unless you have full hold on the subject. ठीक है, तो ये धीरे धीरे होल्ड आया, उसको तो बार बार पढ़ा, कई सारी चीजें प्रैक्टिकली करी, प्रैक्टिकली देखी. तो माय पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू इज दैट ये जितने भी अकाउंटिंग स्टैंडर्ड्स हैं आप अपने मतलब प्रैक्टिकल लाइफ के अलावा एग्जामिनेशन पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से भी आप इनको हल्के में नहीं लें. ये कुछ स्टैंडर्ड ऐसे हैं अगर आपने इसको प्रॉपर कर लिया और वही सवाल आ गया तो फिर आपकी तो बल्ले बल्ले हो जाएगी, और प्रॉपर नहीं किया तो फिर क्या होगा वो आपको पता है, ब्लड दिए बिना ही डोनेट हो जाएगा. तो ये आपको पढ़ने जरूरी है. ब्लड डोनेशन अलग जगह है और ये पढ़ाई अलग है, इसके ऊपर आप थोड़ा ध्यान दो. CA डे है, सेलिब्रेशन है, मुझे पता है वहाँ तुम ब्लड तो आधा घंटा दोगे और बैठोगे 2 घंटे गपशप मारोगे, है ना. तो with this we can conclude. Sorry क्योंकि अपन थोड़ा जल्दी कंक्लूड कर रहे हैं इसके ऊपर, और अब अपन क्विज पे चले जाते हैं ताकि 5 बजे तक अपन इसको कंक्लूड करें.